The unexpected call. The sun had just risen over New Delhi, casting a golden glow across the Prime Minister's residence. Narendra Modi was seated at his desk reviewing an important file. It was a day filled with high-profile meetings, one of which could potentially shape the country's future. Every minute had been scheduled with precision. Yet, as his eyes scanned the crisp pages before him, his personal secretary stepped in quietly, a phone in hand. Her expression was unusual, half hesitant, half urgent. "Sir," she said softly, "there's a man on the line. He says it's an emergency, but he isn't anyone on today's schedule." Modi looked up, his gaze calm but curious. In his world, countless people claimed emergencies. Most turned out to be personal favors or exaggerated requests. Still, something about the secretary's tone made him pause. "Put him through," he said. The voice on the other end trembled. "Sir, I'm sorry to disturb you. My name is Aaron. I'm not important, but my daughter, she's only 8. She's in the hospital. The doctors say she needs a rare medicine today, or she won't make it. I've tried everything, calls, messages, even standing outside offices, but no one listens. They say it's not possible. You are my last hope." There was silence on the line. Narendra Modi could hear the sound of the man's labored breathing, and faintly, the beeping of hospital machines in the background. The logical part of his mind knew that this wasn't the kind of matter a prime minister personally handled. There were systems for such things, ministries and officers trained for it. But another part of him, the one that remembered the years of struggle and the pain of seeing helpless faces in small towns, knew this wasn't a moment for protocol. He asked for the hospital's name, the doctor's contact, and the exact medicine. His secretary looked uneasy. "Sir, you have a meeting with foreign investors in 40 minutes. It took months to arrange." He closed the file slowly. "Tell them the meeting will wait," he said. The decision was instant, but the ripple it caused in the room was not. Aides exchanged glances. The country's leader was canceling a strategic meeting for an unknown man's plea. It sounded absurd to some, but to Modi, leadership wasn't just about numbers, trade, and agreements. It was about people, one life at a time if necessary. As the convoy rolled out, his mind went back decades, to his days in Vadnagar, helping at his father's tea stall, watching travelers stop briefly before rushing away. He knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to have no one pause for your pain. That memory anchored his decision. The drive to the hospital was tense. Calls were made from his car to the health ministry, to suppliers, to the state administration. His security detail tried to keep the route clear, but morning traffic in the capital had its own rules. Through it all, he kept his focus, occasionally asking for updates. When they arrived, the sight was humbling. A small, overcrowded government hospital with peeling paint and families sitting on the floor. Cameras and media were nowhere in sight. No one had been informed. Inside, Aaron stood in disbelief as the Prime Minister himself walked toward him. The man's eyes filled with tears, his hands shaking. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." Modi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's save your daughter first. Then we can talk." Within an hour, the medicine had arrived, escorted by a special courier. Doctors worked quickly. In the hallway, Aaron's wife clutched a scarf in her hands, whispering silent prayers. Time slowed. Then a nurse emerged with a faint smile. "She's stable. She will recover." Aaron dropped to his knees, sobbing. "You canceled your meeting. For us." Modi's eyes softened. "For her," he said, glancing toward the room where the little girl now lay sleeping, safe for the moment. Outside, the world still rushed with deadlines and deals. But inside that small hospital, one act of compassion had shifted the course of an entire day, and perhaps an entire life. And as he left, Narendra Modi thought to himself, sometimes the most important meetings are the ones you never planned for. The whispers and the wait. The next morning, news of what had happened began to leak out, though not through official channels. There had been no press release, no photos, no speeches. Instead, it came through whispers, hospital staff telling friends, friends telling family, and a few bystanders posting shaky, grainy videos online. Within hours, social media was buzzing. PM cancels high-profile meeting to save child, read one headline. Some praised it as an act of humanity. Others questioned the decision. Was it right to risk an important deal for one person? Analysts debated on television. Narendra Modi heard the noise but did not let it distract him. He had lived long enough to know that public opinion was like the wind. It changed direction without warning. What mattered to him was that the little girl, Mira, was alive. But his aides were restless. In the meeting room that afternoon, a senior advisor leaned forward, voice low but urgent. Sir, foreign investors were displeased. They said it showed instability, that priorities are unclear. Some even hinted they might reconsider their plans. Modi looked at him steadily. If they cannot see the value in a leader caring for his people, they are free to walk away. The room fell silent. It wasn't defiance. It was conviction. Yet he knew the political cost could be real. Opposition leaders were already preparing to use the incident in their speeches. Later that evening, alone in his office, he thought about the weight of leadership. The easy thing would have been to let someone else handle Aaron's call, to never know the name of the child in the hospital. But easy choices rarely built the country he dreamed of. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Arun. There was a picture of Mira sitting up in bed, smiling weakly while holding a handmade card. It read in uneven letters, "Thank you for saving my life." He stared at it for a long time, a quiet smile forming. That night, before sleeping, he remembered a lesson his mother once told him as a boy. Never measure a day by the profit you make, but by the good you do for someone who cannot repay you. What he didn't know was that this act, this one day, was about to set in motion a chain of events far beyond a hospital ward. Because in a small apartment across the city, Arun was making a decision of his own. He sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before him, old letters, half-finished notes, and one thick folder marked urgent. These were documents he had guarded for years, tied to a story no one wanted to hear. His wife noticed his trembling hands. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. Arun nodded. "He saved our daughter without asking for anything. Maybe he's the one who will finally listen." And as the city lights blinked outside their window, Arun began writing a letter to Narendra Modi. A letter that would reveal something dangerous, something hidden, and something that might change everything. The letter that couldn't wait. The letter arrived 3 days later, delivered by hand through a local courier. It was placed on Narendra Modi's desk by his secretary, who noticed the sender's name and raised an eyebrow. "Sir, it's from Arun. Should I read it first?" Modi shook his head. "No, I'll read it myself." The envelope was plain, slightly crumpled, with the faint smell of hospital antiseptic still clinging to it. Inside was a stack of pages, written in uneven but urgent handwriting. The first line made him sit up straight. "Sir, the medicine you brought saved my daughter. Now I must tell you why her illness was no accident." As he read, the room seemed to grow quieter. Arun explained that he worked at a small factory in the outskirts of the city, one that produced chemical dyes. The plant was owned by a powerful businessman with strong political connections. Months ago, Aaron had discovered that toxic waste from the factory was being dumped into a stream that ran past several neighborhoods, including his own. Children began falling sick. Elderly residents developed strange coughs. Complaints were made, but each one disappeared into silence. Arun suspected bribery and intimidation. He had tried to report it, but soon after he was threatened. His wife begged him to stop. Then, 2 weeks ago, Mira fell suddenly ill. The doctors said it was due to a rare chemical poisoning, exactly the kind of toxin used at the factory. The letter ended with a single plea. "Sir, I believe the factory is still dumping waste. If nothing is done, more children will suffer. I can give you proof, but my life is in danger. You are the only person I trust." Modi sat back, the weight of the words pressing down on him. This was no longer a private act of kindness. It was now a matter of justice. But exposing it could spark a political storm. The businessman Arun accused was known for funding major campaigns and had deep ties within multiple states. He called his security advisor, who arrived within minutes. We need to verify this discreetly, Modiji said. No leaks, no names. If this is true, it's not just one child at risk, it's an entire community. Over the next few days, a quiet investigation began. Plainclothes officers visited the area, water samples were taken under false pretenses, and satellite images of the stream were reviewed. What they found was worse than expected. Not only was the waste dump real, but it was happening on a much larger scale than Aaron had described. Trucks were operating at night, and there were signs of forged safety reports sent to regulators. One evening, while reviewing the early findings, Modiji's chief of staff spoke carefully. "Sir, if you move against them, you will make powerful enemies. This could cost you politically." Modiji didn't look up from the file. Some costs are worth paying. But before they could act, something happened that forced their hand. 2 nights later, Aaron disappeared. His wife called the hospital first, thinking he might have gone to check on Mira. When he wasn't there, she went to the police, but the officers seemed uninterested. In her desperation, she made one more call, to the same number she had seen on her husband's phone when he spoke to the Prime Minister. It was almost midnight when Narendra Modiji's phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was shaking, filled with panic. "Sir, they've taken him." And in that moment, the quiet investigation turned into a race against time. The race to find Arun, the call from Aaron's wife, lingered in Narendra Modiji's mind long after it ended. He knew the kind of men who could make someone vanish without a trace. The longer they waited, the colder the trail would become. He summoned his security team immediately. The room filled quickly, faces alert, eyes sharp. "We have one objective," he said quietly but firmly. "Find Aaron before they silence him." The team began pulling every thread they could, phone records, CCTV feeds, traffic cameras, anything that might show where Aaron had gone after leaving his home. The first lead came from a street camera near the bus depot. Footage showed Arun walking quickly, looking over his shoulder. Then, a dark van pulled alongside him. 2 men stepped out, grabbed him, and shoved him inside. The van drove away without hesitation. There was no license plate, it had been removed. But a faint logo on the van's rear door was visible in one frame, a transport company that on paper was owned by a small contractor but in reality was linked to the same businessman behind the factory. Modiji's jaw tightened. "We trace that van. Now." Meanwhile, his aides urged caution. "Sir, we should pass this to local authorities," one suggested. He shook his head. "Those are the same authorities who ignored the dumping. This stays in our hands." Hours passed. Investigators learned that the van had entered an abandoned warehouse complex on the outskirts of the city. It was a risky place, remote, unguarded by official eyes, and known for illicit activities. By evening, a small team of trusted officers prepared to move in. Modiji insisted on receiving updates in real time. His staff knew he was unusually invested in this case. Most leaders would have stepped back, but he refused. Just before sunset, the officers reached the warehouse. Inside, they found signs of recent activity, footprints in dust, cigarette butts, and a chair with ropes still tied to it. There was no sign of Aaron. Then they found something chilling. Under a pile of discarded tarpaulin was a bag containing his wallet, phone, and the original folder of documents he had shown no one but his wife. Modiji was informed immediately. "Sir, the folder has records of illegal waste shipments and payments to officials. This is the proof he was talking about." But proof meant nothing if Aaron was dead. That night, Modiji couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the image of Mira in the hospital, smiling shyly from her bed. What would he tell her if her father never came back? At dawn, a new lead came. A highway toll booth had recorded a black Jeep leaving the warehouse area just before midnight. Inside, barely visible, was a man slumped in the back seat, matching Arun's description. The Jeep's trail led toward a coastal town hundreds of kilometers away. Intelligence suggested the kidnappers planned to put him on a fishing vessel that could disappear into international waters. Modiji made the call without hesitation. "Intercept them before they reach the coast." What followed was a tense, high-speed operation. Highway patrol units blocked exits while unmarked vehicles tailed the Jeep from a distance. The kidnappers, realizing they were being followed, tried to evade. Finally, near a bend in the road, the jeep skidded to a stop. Two men jumped out and ran into the scrubland. Officers chased them while others rushed to the vehicle. Arun was inside, bruised, weak, but alive. When he was brought back to the city, Modiji met him privately. Arun's voice was hoarse. "Sir, they knew I had the documents. They were going to make me disappear." Modiji put a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe now, and so is the truth." But both of them knew safety was temporary. The men behind this wouldn't stop just because one rescue had succeeded. The next step was going to be even more dangerous, taking on the network that had kept this crime hidden for years. Breaking the wall of silence, the morning after Arun's rescue, Narendra Modiji sat at the long conference table in his private office. The folder of documents lay open in front of him, every page marked with evidence of crimes. Payment records, fake safety reports, transportation logs for the toxic waste, even photographs of the dumping sites. He had handled countless files in his career, but this one felt heavier than paper should. It wasn't just corruption. It was cruelty, measured in sickness and stolen years. Arun sat across from him, pale but determined. "Sir," he said quietly, "these men think they own everything, the land, the law, even the people. If you fight them, you will fight back harder than you can imagine." Modiji leaned forward. "Then we will imagine harder, we will plan better, and we will make sure they cannot hide." He called in a small team of his most trusted officers from the Central Investigation Bureau. Each was known for their integrity and refusal to bow to pressure. Phones were collected to ensure nothing leaked. "You have 7 days," Modiji told them. "Gather everything we need to shut this down completely. Evidence, witnesses, financial trails. We cannot give them time to destroy proof." The operation began quietly. Undercover agents posed as truck drivers, factory workers, and even buyers of the illegal waste. Drones captured footage at night. Environmental scientists tested water samples from the stream and found contamination hundreds of times above legal limits. But as the investigation deepened, resistance began. One of the officers' families received threats. A local journalist covering the story was beaten and hospitalized. An anonymous message was delivered to the Prime Minister's office. "Stop, or the next time, it won't be a warning." When Modiji read it, his expression didn't change. "If they are threatening us, it means they are afraid," he said calmly. Then came a breakthrough. One of the businessman's former employees, a man named Rajesh, came forward. He had been in charge of falsifying the environmental reports and could testify to everything. But there was a problem. He was hiding in a rural village, terrified for his life. Modiji personally arranged for his protection. "You will be safe," he told him when they met in a secure location. "And when the time comes, you will speak for those who cannot." With Rajesh's testimony, the case was nearly ready, but timing was crucial. The businessman had powerful friends, and if word reached them too early, they could destroy months of work in a single day. The final plan was set. Simultaneous. EU's raids on the factory, the warehouses, and the businessman's residence. Everything would happen at dawn, when surprise was strongest. On the night before the operation, Modiji walked alone through the quiet corridors of his residence. He thought about Mira, about the other children whose names he would never know, about Arun's trembling voice on that first call. This was why he had canceled that meeting. Not because of sentiment, but because leadership meant standing between the powerful and the powerless, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was dangerous. As the clock approached 4 a.m, the team moved into position. Radios buzzed softly with final instructions. In less than an hour, the silence of the night would be shattered, and so would the wall of protection that had shielded the guilty for years. The dawn that changed everything. The air was cold and still as the first light of dawn touched the city. Across 3 different locations, unmarked vans waited in silence. Inside them were officers, nervous, focused, and ready. Each one knew that what they were about to do could end careers or even lives if it went wrong. Narendra Modiji sat in his office, the phone to his ear, listening as the operation commander gave the countdown. His eyes didn't leave the clock. This was not just a police action. It was a strike against an entire network of corruption that had hidden behind power for years. 3, 2, 1, move, came the voice over the line. In seconds, the quiet morning erupted. Gates were smashed open at the factory compound. Startled guards reached for their phones but were pushed aside as officers poured in. Computers, filing cabinets, and storage rooms were seized. Barrels of illegal chemical waste were found stacked high, their lids rusted and leaking. At the warehouses, trucks loaded with hazardous waste were stopped before they could be moved. Drivers were taken into custody. Inside the businessman's lavish home, officers moved through marble halls, opening safes stuffed with cash, gold, and offshore account statements. The businessman himself was pulled from his bed, stunned and furious. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" he shouted at the lead officer. The officer simply replied, "Yes, and that's exactly why we're here." Back in the control room, Modi Ji listened as updates came in one after another. The raids were successful. Dozens of arrests had been made. Every piece of evidence they needed was now in government hands. But what struck him most was the voice of Arun calling moments later. "Sir, it's over?" "It's beginning," Modi Ji corrected gently. "Now comes the part where we make sure they can never hurt anyone again." Over the next weeks, the case exploded in the media. For the first time, the public saw the scale of the crime, how a profitable business had poisoned its own people for years, and how officials had looked away. Court hearings began, and with Rajesh's testimony, combined with the hard evidence seized in the raids, the case was airtight. The businessman and several high-ranking accomplices were sentenced to long prison terms. Stricter environmental laws were pushed through Parliament, closing the loopholes that had allowed such dumping. Through it all, Modi Ji avoided turning the story into personal glory. When asked about it at a press conference, he simply said, "A nation is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. Sometimes that means setting aside the big meetings for the bigger duties." Months later, he visited the small hospital again. Mira was there, running in the courtyard with other children, her laughter bright against the afternoon air. Arun and his wife stood in awe, Irbi watching with tears in their eyes. As Modi Ji prepared to leave, Arun handed him a small box. Inside was the same card Mira had made months before, the one that said, "Thank you for saving my life." But now she had added new words in bright crayon, "And for saving everyone else too." Modi Ji smiled quietly, closed the box, and placed it in his pocket. He knew that most people would never know the full story of what had happened, the late-night calls, the threats, the danger. And that was fine. Because the true reward wasn't in headlines or applause. It was in knowing that a stranger's call one morning had led to justice, hope, and a reminder that sometimes changing one life can change many.